Hello, my loyal subjects, and welcome! Today I'm going to talk about how I preview materials in Blender. Now, one of the things that I've been asked some questions regarding is how I preview materials in Blender and just specific elements of it, not like the whole broad subject, but it's really not, I don't do anything too fancy, I just have my own workflow down for how to do it. So, first and foremost, let's talk about my preview sphere. I recommend using a sphere because it shows you kind of all of the view angles for an object, but I also recommend not using just a basic standard sphere, as many objects look very, very different. So, having kind of a displaced one. Now, why did I just add a cube, you might ask? Well, I'm going to tuck this off in a corner real quick. Let's add a UV sphere. This might be your immediate reflex. Hey, UV sphere! UV spheres are really bad for previewing materials because they pinch at the top. They have this pinched detail at the top that's really bad. Like, they have all their detail at the top and not much detail at the sides, which is just not a very good sphere to begin with. So one of the things that I recommend is adding a cube. And we're going to turn this cube into a sphere. And it will be an evenly detailed sphere. A very, very good sphere. Now, for those of you who are aware of the Polysphere add-on, this is a better sphere. And you can see the detail on it, it's not pinched. It has corners, but it's not pinched. So you can kind of smooth it out and everything. It's really nice. That's what we're going to be building. I personally like building it out of modifiers, just because it's slightly easier and because you don't need an add-on for it. And by easier, I just mean it takes a little bit longer, but you get more control. So in this case, let's add subdivision surface. This kind of looks like a sphere, but if you look at the shading, you can see the shading warping as we rotate. It's still kind of cube-shaped to a certain degree. We can fix this. We can add a modifier called cast. Now, you might not be aware of what cast does, but this is what cast does. How many of you remember that really old wallpaper with the warping object? This is that system. I know, many of you are going to now recreate it. You know you are. Don't lie. But, yeah, this is the cast modifier. Now, in this case, we don't want to cast it to a cube. We want to cast it to a sphere, which means set its factor to 1, which will mean it snaps it directly onto that shape. You know, basically it shifts it into some form of shape. So, for example, cube, sphere, cylinder, etc. In this case, we want sphere. We want a perfect sphere. We can add as much detail as we want, and still it's relatively even because it was originally a cube, an incredibly even surface. Funnily enough, cube topology makes better spheres than traditional sphere topology. So anyway, cubes are better spheres than spheres are in most cases. However, again, I recommended against having just a flat surface like this, and there's also the reason why I put it up to 7 subdivision levels and have the thing in a really strong wireframe. I'm going to choose optimal display for the sake of my own sanity. Let's actually go and add a displace modifier. As you can see, it'll push away from the surface. I'm going to click the Add New Texture button, and we're going to jump over to our Texture tab. This is just, this allows us to edit our textures and customize some settings. And in this case, I want to modify the displace texture, and I want to change it. There are a variety of things you can do here. It's by default image or movie, which is why it just pushes out or pulls into the surface, because it has no information to go off. So I'm going to add wood. Now, why wood? Because wood is really cool looking when you play with it. So as you can see, by default, it's kind of this, which is not good. I'm also going to turn on a matte cap because Blender's built-in shading looks like crap. So, anyway, you just go, you hit N to open up this tab, you go into shading, hit matte cap, and select what material capture you want. You can do car paints, you can do reflective. This one is the one I use the most just because it's a really good shading one that's not really material biased. This one also looks very good. The shading looks good on it, so I also use that one for previewing. I'm going to go to my modifiers and turn down this displacement slightly to 0.1. So anyway, here it now looks more like a sphere, but I'm going to jump back over to my wood texture here, and let's play with it a bit. So if I go to saw, for example, you get this kind of layered look. If I go to try, you get these very sharp, these very, very nice sharp edges that are very tiered, and I like them. This is my personal favorite. You can choose rings, which looks a little bit different, and in this case isn't showing up. You can choose banded noise, which will actually add noise to the bandedness of it. Now there's soft noise, which kind of gives you this weird cloudy distortion, or you can choose hard noise, which will give you this kind of fiery looking stuff. In this case, it's really detailed. There's a lot of very small scale noise. I'm going to increase the scale to 1, and you'd see, boom, this is the usual material I preview with. I do about 1.5 generally, for the sake of sanity and simplicity. So anyway, you can see here, this is a decent previewing material. Maybe a little bit displaced from the surface, a bit too much, but you can see here, it's a decent sphere. Our detail is even. Our detail is very even, so that we don't have like pinch points or whatever, especially when displacing like this. We don't have weird pinching at the top and, the kind of horrible artifacting. This is probably my favorite form of sphere. It's also very even, which means performance-wise, you're not wasting a bunch of polygons on a tiny 1 centimeter area. So, let's move on to the actual material previewing. So one trick with opening the node editor that I would recommend, in your scene view, or any view in Blender, you can click on the top right-hand corner, these 3 little bars, and drag towards that view, towards the inside of the view, to snap out a new pane. So in this case, in the scene view, I'm dragging from the top right to the left. Now if you want to collapse it, you can grab that same corner and drag away from the center of your view into another one. And it'll give you this black arrow saying, hey, I want to collapse a view. You can also drag back the other direction if you want to collapse it the other direction, but you can snap it there. This is a lot faster once you get used to it, and also just a lot more intuitive. Now I could go down here and change it to the node editor, but I can also go Shift F3 to jump over to the node editor. You can hit Shift and then the F keys to open up different windows. For example, F5 is your scene view, F3 is your node editor, and F10 is your UV image editor, which once you get used to that, it's pretty fast. Let's add a material. There's a nice little add material button at the bottom of the node editor that a lot of people don't know exists. So, simple enough. We now have our material. I'm going to make it kind of a reddish color so that we can see that we changed our material. Now, I could go over in my World tab and, select this, but a lot of people don't also know that the World material, the thing that you can control with this color and everything, which if I just crank up the color a bit and hit Shift-Z in the scene view, you can now see, previewed, very nicely. This whole colored environment and everything like that, that's not just, that's not just a built-in thing. That's actually a node graph. It's a material. On the bottom of the node editor, we have object, a little cube indicating an object's material. We have a planet indicating our world's material. And also we have a pen, which is line style, but we'll ignore that for now. Let's check on the planet. You'll notice, a lot like the compositor, we have a use nodes checkbox. Let's check it. And now we have a shader. A background shader. We can even look at our different shaders here. We have background, mix and add, even volume shaders. So for example, if you do homogeneous volume, where you have fog all throughout your level, or scene rather, you can actually use volume absorption and volume scatter in your scene to actually apply them here. So when you check homogeneous volume, or when you go in here, I guess, and be under volume, when you select one of these shaders, like volume absorption, you can see it actually gets connected up here, a lot like the material editor. If I delete it, you can see the material editor over here updates. So we have a node editor. It's amazing. Let's go ahead and add an environment texture. So anyway, if we add an environment texture, why an environment texture and not an image texture? Because there are some differences. First of all, the environment texture actually allows you or excessive color data. It is HDR supporting. So an image texture only goes between like fully bright white and 0. It's just a standard image. It goes to white and it goes to black. HDR, on the other hand, allows you to load in a few different images in the form of an HDR image, and or HDRI for high dynamic range image. It allows you to have like low exposure and high exposure and have higher ranges of color. I'm going to click open and I'm going to go to my HDRI library. You can download these. I recommend HDRI Labs for good HDR images. I'm going to go over here to one of my favorite, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that, Shiodome Stairs, or Shiodome, or something like that. I'm going to choose the 3K HDR image. Make sure it's .hdr and not JPEG, so that you actually have all the color data. So now we have this. Let's plug this into our background. And boom, you can see, it's amazing! But you also notice that my material got very noisy. This is because it's sampling the entire environment as though it's a light. And lights are noisy. We can easily fix this by going into our world settings, under the settings panel, and check multiple important sampling. Now there's this little map resolution thing. Basically, the higher you increase this, the slower your rendering will go, but the less noise you will have. So I've found 1024 works for me. Gets rid of the majority of my noise without necessarily dealing with a lot of my, wrecking my render times. So I'm going to jump over to my material here, and I'm just going to make this a little bit more interesting for the purposes of preview. Let's go in here to shader, mix shader. And I'm just going to add a Fresnel in there because I just want this to be a glossy plastic. I'm just going to throw this together so we have something to look at. And, yeah. As usual with Blender's Fresnel, it's very, very strong. It's about 10% dead on, even though it should be like 4, sadly. It's a little bit weird like that. I think the dead on reflections are way too strong on Blender's built-in Fresnel, but for now it's testing. That's just personal. It could be completely physically correct, I don't like how it looks. So, I highly doubt it's physically correct, but, anyway, so as a result, you get this. We can see the reflection and everything, but here's a problem. Let's say we're previewing a model or a material, and we want to show it, and it's kind of hard to distinguish from the background and the foreground. Like, you can tell that the sphere here is the focal point, but the problem is that when I'm showing my material and everything, it's kind of hard to view, or like if I want to show a screenshot of it or whatever, that's a lot of miscellaneous background kind of noise in this case, or not really noise, but, you know, stuff that your eye has to kind of filter through before it can sort of realize, oh, hey, the focal point is this center thing. Now, you could use depth of field, but depth of field is incredibly slow, and you have to add a ton of samples to actually do it. So, I'm going to duplicate this environment texture, and I'm going to select a different one. By clicking the little X button on the right side, it'll remove it, and then I'm going to open a new one. And by a new one, I'm going to go straight back to Shoot 'em Stairs, and most of the time when you download an HDRI, they'll have a couple different versions, one of them being environment.hdr. You'll notice this one's only a few kilobytes, while this one up here is like 15 megabytes. The reason for this is it's very, very blurry. If I just load it in real quick, and then connect it up, you can see it's very blurry. Now this kind of gets what we want. It's not distracting, it shows us our material in all of its glory. We don't have to use depth of field and have to, we can have less samples and it's less noisy in the background. However, the problem is our reflections are now blurry. It's really blurry and it's horrible and we can't properly preview our material. No matter what we do, our reflections will be blurry. This ends up looking more like rubber as a result, rather than what it was before, which was very, very smooth plastic. So we have this very sharp reflection, and we have this very blurry one. I'm using Node Wrangler and Control-Shift clicking, by the way. You can do that on various things. I'm going to add a mix color node. I'm going to mix between both of them. Now, you'll notice this doesn't give us the result we want. It's cool looking, but doesn't give us the result we want. What we want to do is we want to make sure that if it's the camera viewing, we want to see the blurry version. So, I'm going to add a light path node, and I'm going to preview the first input. So you can see here, it's white, or 1, where around the edges, because it's saying, hey, the background will be white, or 1, if it's the camera directly seeing it, and it doesn't pass through anything at all beforehand. You can do shadow ray, diffuse ray, and you'll notice when diffuse is checking to see against the background, it's saying, hey, I'm really bright, light up. You can do glossy, in which case we have a white reflection. And you can do reflection, because you have diffuse reflection and glossy reflection. You can do ray depth. There's all kinds of fancy stuff you can do. In this case, we only care about is camera, and probably is diffuse. So I'm going to grab the blurry version. I'm going to plug it into the bottom slot, and the sharp version into the, into the top slot here. So anyway, what this basically means is, if it's not the camera, then show the sharp version. Otherwise, show the blurry version. basically, if it's the camera ray viewing something, it'll be 1, in which case we want to show the very blurry version here, which if you look here, it's underscore environment. Now there's, and we've also got our very high-res 3K one up here for reflections and anything else. Now there's a problem here. If I look, my material is kind of noisy, and we can actually do a funny little cheat. Not really lose much quality, we actually gain some because it's not as noisy. Let's just talk about diffuse for a second. Diffuse, there's no real point for a diffuse material, which is very rough and blurry to begin with, to actually, there's no point for a, kind of blurry material to actually, this kind of thing that can't really reflect a sharp image, to use the sharp image. It's just getting a lot of noise because of it. So one of the things we can do is we can go into Math, Add, and we can add these two values together. So if either one of them is true, if it's a camera ray or a diffuse ray, then it will use the blurry version. Notice our material is slightly less blurry. This is just one of those little things that can help you clean up your material renders and save you some render time. Anyway, in short, if it's a diffuse ray, use the blurry version. If it's a camera ray, use the blurry version. Otherwise, use the very fancy version that is 3K, 3,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels or whatever. Anyway, let's jump back to our material, and boom, we have a material preview. We have this nice reflection. The reflection has these nice sharp reflections to it. And, I can go in here, I can rough it up if I want, make them a little bit more rough, or I can sharpen them out, etc. And this is how I preview a lot of my personal materials. So anyway, hope that was informative to some of you. I know that was a little bit of a long video for really, kind of a simple task, but I hope that was interesting to some of you, and, anyway, Blender things. Peace out.